Good afternoon. I'm calling this meeting to order. And Brittany, would you confirm that we have a meeting quorum, please?
I can confirm that there's a quorum present.
Thank you very much. Are there any matters subsequent to the posting of the agenda that we want to add? Not seeing any. I'll move to item 4 of our agenda. Public comment. This is our first meeting post the expiry of the governor's emergency COVID order. So we'll be running this a tiny bit differently. So if any of our board members have any members of the public at your location who would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. And I am not seeing anyone raising their hand, so we'll now move to item 5, the consent agenda. And we have one item on the consent agenda. If there isn't a request to remove an item from the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
This is
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, who made the motion?
Central Coast.
Okay, Central Coast and Sonoma. Before we go to a vote, board members, are there any members of the public at your location that would like to comment on this item? If yes, please raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands. We'll go to a vote. Brittany?
Okay, for the consent agenda, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy, I believe is absent, Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Thank you. We'll move to item 6A, the regular meeting, discussion of offshore wind development. And our general manager, Alex Morris, has a slide deck and he'll lead the conversation.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thanks again for getting together today. We did want to bring everyone together to provide some quick updates on the offshore wind RFI and allow for some discussion. And then I also wanted the next agenda item will be part of the GM update is to warm everybody up for budget approval as we look ahead for the 23 to 24 fiscal year. And my hope is that we have discussion and comments during these items because naturally we're trying to do what this board wants, and this is the appropriate time to give us that direction if applicable. So quickly on the offshore wind RFI, I wanted to thank Tim Haynes and many of you, your staff who are on the ad hoc subcommittee helping us get this started. Amy, if we could advance to the next slide, you'll see that we're really just gearing up here. So over the next few months, we're going to start this ad hoc subcommittee on offshore wind. It will involve a bunch of information gathering, essentially. Some of the details would be conversations with leaseholders, understandings of the timeline and contractual steps associated with actually getting offshore wind in contract and delivered and when that could occur, what are the barriers, et cetera. And then a bit more information on the value of the type of wind. We know that there's a lot of information on the wind factor shape and the seasonality benefits. So trying to get some of that quantified and written down is another goal. Ultimately, we would then issue an RFI and ask for specific information that would probably be under non-disclosure agreements to help inform us, and then we would report back in the appropriate ways. We have a projected timeline here, which is really to start the meetings with the ad hoc committee this month, and then be moving through over the next couple of months to try to get an RFI out and then get the results tabulated and report back. We're pretty excited about this. And we also know there's some discussion in the state about sort of who will be responsible and how will the state go about ensuring clean energy goals are met. And if appropriate, we avail ourselves of these great wind resources. And so I think the RFI is an important step for us in that. And with that, I wanted to see if there was any additional comments or questions, particularly from those of you on coastal areas or who might have a particular appetite for offshore wind and want to participate.
I would like to participate, Nick.
All right, Nick, great. Thanks. And I see Jeff's hand is raised. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also very interested, and I think this is important for a lot of reasons to signal to the market about our appetite, to signal to the transmission planning agencies that this is a priority, that there are off-takers ready to negotiate. And to that end, one of the topics that has come up for me and our team lately is that there's a conversation right now in Sacramento about central procurement of generating resources. But so far as I know, there isn't a topic that's being discussed about central procurement of transmission resources. And I think, given that transmission is really a precursor to generation construction, I think this is also a useful tool for us to open a conversation in Sacramento and with the regulators about the need for, potential need anyway, for state support and pushing for critical transmission infrastructure for reliability. And we've already got geothermal contracts and long duration storage, and now we're adding offshore wind to that. So I think this is really, really important for getting contracts eventually signed, but all those necessary early steps. So I'm absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to call on people. It'll be Jan, followed by Barbara, and then Rob. Jan.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very interested in the offshore wind development as well. And I had volunteered earlier for the ad hoc committee, so I don't know if this is expanding it, but I would like to continue to have Peninsula Clean Energy involved in this and have a seat in the committee. As you know, we're pursuing our 24/7 renewables strategy, and offshore wind will play a very important part of that. And we would like to help move all of this along.
Thank you, Jan. Before we go to Barbara, Alex, could you just clarify what your request is for interest? Is it to be on the ad hoc committee or just interest in participating in the
Well, yeah, I
RFI?
think the good point, Girish. The ad hoc committee itself is going to work on designing the RFI and participating actively in the work of it, including some of the discussions and interviews. As a good example, we'll probably invite some briefings from some leaseholders and also from American Clean Power, other associations, sort of acting as the voice of the offshore wind folks to better understand their timing and what will be available and when. I think involved in that, we would touch on some of the transmission items like Jeff mentioned, and if that's a barrier or not. And once we have that, we'll launch the RFI. This whole board, of course, will get briefed and have access to the findings of the RFI. But I would welcome the staff support or direct involvement from any of you if you want to ride along or direct the specific ad hoc committee.
Yeah. So there's some Brown Act considerations on that. So I think that's where I'm headed. So maybe over here, I think, and we've already set up the ad hoc committee. So I'm thinking that what we are looking for is interest in the RFI, and then you and I can figure out the logistics of making sure from a Brown Act perspective, we have the right number of people in the ad hoc committee. And then, of course, the communication and scope, everyone will be briefed on. So with that clarification, I'll move on to Rob.
Thank you, Girish. And I was going to ask the same question just to clarify the ad hoc committee, but going back to the timeline, and Jeff, I think your comments are right on. If the intention is to show not just the developer community, the ability and willingness to engage, but also understanding where this central procurement discussion is, I'm wondering, could we move that more aggressively towards an April release of an RFI, just so that we're not behind the budget discussion as that moves through, and there may be a different timeline in terms of how that bill is going to progress, but I guess my
Yeah.
question is,
Yeah,
can't
I hear you,
we
Rob.
get something out sooner?
Yeah, I do think you raise a good point about the timing of launching the RFI and how that interplays with the state's strategy for understanding if this potential resource will get unlocked. If you're okay with it, let me work with the ad hoc committee to see if we can expedite things as much as possible. And we do plan to get that committee mustered this month. So I'll have a lot more information and active visibility to the schedules of the team. And I already have started doing a little preliminary outreach. So I know there's interest for people to come talk with us. So I think we can try to accelerate it, and we'll let you know.
And what I recollect from the last meeting, Rob, it's 3CE, Redwood Coast, and Peninsula that are on the ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think we could probably add one more. So we'll just work with Alex on that and connect up with you. All right. Anything, oh, sorry, before anything else from board members on this item before we go to public comment for this item? All right, board members, if there's any member of the public at your location that would like to comment on this item, please raise your hands.
And also
No.
just clarifying, if you are on the Zoom link, you can also raise your virtual hand.
Yeah. Virtual hand, not seeing any virtual or physical hands raised. We'll move to item 6B, the GM report. Alex?
Yeah, so again, thanks everybody. It's a pleasure to be here working with you. And I wanted to share a little bit of some of the preliminary planning work that I've been undertaking. And this is actually all in line with your strategic plan. So many of you know that the board engaged in a strategic planning exercise late last year. As part of that, there was the plan to move forward with a full-time general manager. There were some preliminary budgeting estimates, and but there was always a chance for the GM to start to digest the progress we've made, which is significant, but then also to work on what's the future vision and is that strategic plan really appropriate. And so what you have here is hopefully a fun discussion for all of us about where we're going to take this organization and how it's going to provide value to you. Ultimately, the process we're looking at is where are we going, what's the work plan to get there, and then how do we resource it appropriately. So this is somewhat mechanical in the end, but what this also is doing is making sure we have a shared vision for where we're going, and then prepping everyone that I'll come back to you in April with a more firmed up budget plan for next year for board approval. So that's what we wanted to do. And I do encourage as much participation as possible. And I think we have time for some good discussion. And I also wanted to tee up that since this organization was formed, it's been moving fast. We've had 4 contracts get put into place. A lot of process and policy has been established. There have been new people. And I think Tim Haynes has done a good job working with the various really important staff from the CCAs to deliver value. All that success being acknowledged, there's still all the signs of a new young organization getting figured out. I think a great example is there's really no reserves for the organization. So as we look at potential models for how this organization grows and delivers value, you know, we want to think of sort of what's the end state and then make sure we're all working together to get there. So with that, next slide, please. And feel free to jump in anytime, but as I indicated, this is really pursuant to your direction. There was a board approved strategic plan. We're now in this process of developing, you know, I use the word work plans to achieve it, and that will inform the budgeting and resourcing. Work plans may be the wrong word. There's many ways we can provide value, in the strategic plan, which you'll see in a moment, does highlight some near-term areas to focus on, and I'll touch on those. And next slide. Also from the strategic plan, you can see that we're actually really on schedule. So hey, good job us, because we adopted the strategic plan. We've now hired the general manager. We're on pace to adopt a budget in April. And I'm starting the work of evaluating the strategic plan, speaking with many of you to get your vision and information, and then put all that together so that we're on pace for a productive year. And then we'll repeat that, and we'll start to formalize the process of adopting the budgets, usually in April, so that it's well in advance of your planning schedules. And I am aware that many of you have different budgeting timelines, and that CC Power needs to work for all of you with your various budgeting timelines. So I get you information in timely ways. Recapping, next slide, Amy. Recapping the strategic plan, a lot stood out there, and I think it was good to acknowledge all the success, but there were a couple items that surfaced as really important for this organization to focus on. One was administrating the 4 approved projects and getting those to the finish line. As many of you know, the earliest online dates are next year, and then drifting into 2026 or maybe beyond. So there's work to be done there, making sure those projects get to the finish line and are up and running and providing value. We're also going to look at growing the portfolio through additional value-added projects. This could take the form of programs or shared services, so we're going to work on that. We're also in this sort of role of potentially supporting you all through information gathering and shared decision making. A good example here would be understanding the IRA and informing the CCAs in terms of really what does it mean, and is CC Power in a relevant place to help out. So we'll work on that. And you also see that we're doing the offshore wind RFI. And then lastly, boosting capabilities for all of you. I think when you start an organization, there are very few norms and policies, and you gradually work the organization with institutional memory and practices so that you have pretty established norms and efficient processes. And it seems like we're well on that journey, although probably, certainly room for improvement. And we'll continue down that path now. And I think getting the board together and just running through our meetings like this is part of the norming process, and then also using the subcommittees or working groups as appropriate will help us a lot. Anything to add from anyone before I move on to sort of where do we go next? Okay.
Alex, I just wanted to add, if there's somebody participating from the public who didn't catch your meaning about reserves, I wanted to explain, at least from my perspective, your comment was about reserves for admin work and flexibility within the staffing of the organization and activities with consultants, and not the liquidity for power supply contracts. I think we've anticipated that liquidity really well. And I think you're spot on, though, about not having a reserves for the other activities. So I just wanted to clarify that.
No, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I really want to avoid any miscommunication. So if anyone hears a word I've used that may lead to miscommunication, let's clarify and make sure that everyone's square. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. So embedded in the strategic plan, next slide, is there's a ton of ways we can provide value. As you saw from the strategic plan, some of those show up more clearly, others are potential future state value products. And some of these we're already committed to in the form of 4 contracts that have been executed or commitments we've made as a board. But we're also open to new ideas. So, this just gives you a feel for the wide range of value add services that could be spooled out. This could include contract administration, shared services, working with scheduling coordinators, looking at the new programs. There's research and modeling. We could look at settlement and billing support functions. And there's a whole list of other items like credit rating matters, voice of industry, working groups, things like that. So this is probably not comprehensive, of course, but I think does give you a sense that we face a pretty exciting opportunity. And of course, embedded and behind that is the need to be strategic and smart with how we scope our organization. And that also links to budgeting. So the purpose here is to get everyone warmed up on understanding what's possible. And then I'd like in the next few slides, some of your participation in how do we approach the growth strategy we want to align on. And so what is that growth strategy? Let's go to the next slide. And this is sort of a very oversimplified mock-up of the organizational trajectory. So, we start as a new organization, and at some point we're up and running fully, delivering all the value you may want. And everything's normalized. There's a team in place, or the right contract is in place. the services are provided, the organization's got the right financial administrative reserves, things are efficient, the processes are clear, et cetera. We're not there in all those cases though, right? We have 4 contracts, 1 staff, none of the resources are operating yet, limited financial reserves, and I'd say we're still in that norming process as everybody wraps their head around it. So let me jump to one more slide and then I'll welcome comment. So as we go towards these shared services models or these future state visions for CC Power, there's a lot of ways we can do it. We can grow fast or we can grow slow. We can, I think what we'll end up doing is growing in the right way. There's different comparison organizations we can use to guide us. Many of you are familiar with SCAPA and NCPA, and I did pick those as 2 potential bookend organizations because they highlight the different structures that an organization like CC Power could pursue. On one hand, you have SCAPA, which I think most people would say is relatively lean. It serves as a contracting center point for multiple municipal utilities. It's got 18 staff. It's got a lot of resources under contract, and it serves, I think, 9 or 7 utilities down in Southern California. To contrast that, you have NCPA. They have multiple generation plants, including large hydro facilities, under their control and operation and ownership. These organizations can have different levels of financing interest in transmission. And NCPA to me stands out because it is the version where you really have done everything in-house and you have 150 staff. So again, not speaking to their strengths and weaknesses, just using these as good comparison examples. And I did want to share sort of my initial understanding and feel is that CC Power is probably more on the SCAPA trajectory than the NCPA trajectory. And that, that's something we can discuss and no decisions need to be made. But I did think that it was helpful now to tee up some conversation and welcome comment from you, because getting our shared organizational vision, at least roughly here, will inform the next step, which is how do we resource in the short run and where are we heading. So with that, I wanted to see if anyone had an interest to comment or provide their perspectives on what the right future vision for CC Power would be. And let's see if we can start to coalesce on that more and more.
So please raise your hand if you want to speak, and I'll just say a few comments to kick this off. So there's a second part to Alex's presentation that we'll come to, but I think this is a good place to pause and get some initial comments. So all of us on this board were involved with Phyllis Curry in developing our strategic plan. So several of the slides that Alex has put together, I hope we all see ourselves reflected in it. But now, once Alex is in here, it's kind of like, let's get the shared vision with Alex on board to make sure that we are resourcing ourselves and aligning ourselves. So even though some of it may be duplicative, I think it's super important that this team that we have now with Alex on board, we want to be on the same place, especially when we start talking about the budget coming up. So looking at hands raised, don't see any yet. So maybe, oh, there's Jeff. Jeff?
Can you repeat the question, please?
And Jen, did you want to speak? So you can go in after Jeff
just
and
asked
Nick
to
will
repeat
have.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question, Garish. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's comments on what Alex has presented so far. We are in the middle of his presentation. So if you have any comments on his presentation, yeah, it's kind of like onboarding him, making sure that we are all on the same page with him right now, because we all have seen this, but with Phyllis, not with Alex. So we'll go with Jeff first, followed by Nick and Barbara.
Yeah, I appreciate you forcing us to think even longer term than our strategic plan, Alex. I think that's healthy. And I think in my mind, fulfilling the goals that we've set out for the next few years in the strategic plan is probably the right step regardless of the end state of the organization. And I don't think we make any mistakes by doing that. I think, and so I think there is a bit of a stepwise approach here that's okay. So even if we don't have yet clear shared vision on where we're going to be in 20 years, I think that's all right, because I think the next 3 years are pretty clear. And so I don't mean to undermine your question at all. I think I'm enjoying thinking about it, and I'll offer other insights if I come up with them. But I think you're on the right track, that at least conceptually, I'm not imagining we duplicate the concepts at NCPA. I think they do have a different business than we do. And I think to a large extent, a lot of us have much of what NCPA does in-house. And so we certainly don't want to duplicate what we can already do ourselves. So I think that's at least conceptually right.
Thanks, Jeff. And I think your point on stepwise growth makes a lot of sense to me, and certainly will be reflected in the budget plans we come up with.
Nick? Please unmute. So let's give Nick. All right, we come back to.
I got
there
it.
he
I
is.
got it. You know,
Yeah.
we have
Alright.
like a 3-screen situation, and I'm just not used to like which one I'm supposed to scroll the which way I'm supposed to scroll. So my apologies. Alex, great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you,
Here. You know, I'm not sure which, you know, those are your two sort of bookend models. There's probably other models to consider as well. I would say what I really would like us to do, or really you to do, Alex, build the business case. If there's a business case where we should be having, you know, folks in trucks turning wrenches, let's have that conversation. If there's a business case for running a customer service center and having, you know, 30 people answering phones, build a business case.
Thank you, Nick. Barbara?
Thank you. I'll echo the welcomes to Alex. Great to see you on board. I just wanted to reflect on a couple things. First, I think the stepwise growth, that expression that that Jeff used really resonates with me. I think the strategic plan, grounding everything that we're talking about in the strategic plan, is absolutely appropriate. Building up from those, what you determine to be the priorities, and building up from there, what does it take resource-wise to address those priorities, and bringing that to us and testing whether we can, you know, stomach it financially. That's going to be, I think, the process, and that'll help us sort of implement that stepwise approach. I also want to just recognize that I think, you know, we all operate in such a dynamic environment. There are so many, like, you know, urgent, like, threats to what we're doing, whether it's legislative or regulatory. And I think I really want to see CC Power stay grounded in the strategic plan, so we don't get distracted and start finding ourselves playing whack-a-mole. I think that's what the real benefit of the strategic plan is. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
All right. Thank you.
Don't see any other comments at this point. So Alex, you have a couple more. Oh, sorry, Mitch has a comment. We'll go to Mitch.
Yeah, just real quick. And again, echo, welcome, Alex. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch.
I think I would just say that we also support the idea of sort of a stepwise approach. What Nick said also resonates with me. If there's a reason for us to go in a particular direction, having that analysis brought back to the board, I think makes a lot of sense for us to be able to consider that. But there is, I think the framework that we put together for the strategic plan makes a lot of sense. One advantage that I think you do have in this board is a bunch of folks who have very recently gone through startup operations. So I think that, at least from my perspective, pretty receptive to some creative thinking as we go into this space. And that we shouldn't necessarily be bound by kind of the example cases that are out there with NCPA or SCAPA. So if that's helpful to you, just wanted to add those thoughts.
Really? Okay. Chair Alexander, so then
go ahead.
I guess we can move on if you're ready. So now this is helpful, and everybody, I appreciate you participating as we gear up for this budget question. So we have had budgets, of course, and it's been a little bit different each year in the process. And I think I'll list up some of the feedback I've got about what are some of the better practices for you all in the budgeting steps. Just to give you some quick history, in 2021 on a 10-month budget, there was a 629K. It's evolved over time, year over year. And then in the beginning of the first 6 months of 2023, we've been on this 555 number. We have preliminarily shared a budget of about $1 million for the 23 to 24 fiscal year. And of course, there's also possibilities that we could propose modifications. And I just wanted to note from the historical financial operations, we have found a couple things to be true, but we're trying to build reserves, and what I mean by financial administrative reserves, but it's fairly limited. And we've also seen cases where things come up. And so sort of to this question of, can we focus, do we stay within scope, or are we light on our feet and changing directions? We sort of need to anticipate that we probably want a bit of both. And the way we've addressed that through Tim's support and leadership and direction was with this technical and legal budget. So we had the capability to bring on contractors if we needed. A good example would be additional negotiations on contracts where, it may be a time-intensive work. We have to be prepared for that. And it was hard to anticipate. So some of that thinking will then go in to the new budget. But, I think the base we're working off of here is that fourth column over the 23 to 24 preliminary budget. And I think as Nick said, if we want to deviate from that, really a case needs to be made for why and what benefits there are so that you guys can rationalize that. And on the next slide, you see some of the other criteria we're solving for in the budget. So through interviews with many of you, through the strategic plan, there's a couple of points that have stood out as critical for the budgeting process and normalizing that. We are resourcing to the strategic plan. So really digesting the strategic plan and pinning down a work plan associated with that is key. And then understanding what we're going to do, but also recognizing we may change directions a little bit. I think one thing I've also seen is that the organization has been heavily reliant on key CCA staff. And we do want to try to right size that reliance, maybe to optimize reliance on the CCA staff so that you have your staff who have their day-to-day functions, but they're still available to help CC Power in the right ways. So we'll try to achieve that. I also know for some of you, particularly with your budget timelines, you need advance notice of what the budget request will be or needs for CC Power will be. So that's why we're getting started on this as quickly as we can. And then we also know that CC Power provides a la carte services. So some people participate, some organizations don't, but we still want a lot of organizations to be interested to participate. And so we need to make it cost reasonable for the CCAs that want to be involved in CC Power yet may not be actually signed on to the contracts. And then lastly, I think we want to be gradually building the organization's financial reserves over time in a responsible way. And then I've also heard it's helpful if we avoid mid-budget cycle adjustments or increases on the organizations, because that can be very disruptive for many of you with your own budget processes. So these are the criteria that we'll wrestle with as we try to come up with a firm, viable budget plan for next year. I wanted to make sure everyone was okay with that and see if there was any additions or changes you might recommend. And I'll go to the next slide then. And again, jump in if anyone has points. And then in the interest of norming everybody, you know, we're going to start to present a lot of information in these same categories every time. I know this is, you know, sort of dry material, but the staff, the service providers, operations, travel and events, and then one of those categories, major project flow through costs. Once the projects are up and running, you know, there's going to be a lot of dollars flowing through those major project flow through. It's probably going to dwarf the rest of the budget. So it'll always be good to separate really what's the administrative budget versus the project specific budget. And then we'll build those reserves over time. Okay, next slide. And I also wanted to share that we're going to continue building on the language you've used so far. As many of you know, you've been asked to contribute to CC Power, and there's been two categories of costs. One is these general costs. Another way of saying that is the dues, and it's not truly dues. It's not a membership organization in that sense, but the general share of costs, and then the project costs. And embedded in those general costs, really, that's where we try to say, hey, anyone who's a fit can be part of this. They'll have a membership and a board role, and they'll have the option to participate. It's a good way to support CC Power as a tool for CCAs. But then only the parties that participate actively in the projects will get the project cost share components. And that is often prescribed and allocated based on the percentage of cost share in each of the contracts. And so we'll continue to try and beef up that methodology so it's predictable and understandable to everyone as we approach you. And then for your budgeting process, what that means is, you know, if you're asked for what should I plan for, you know, it'll look something like your dues plus your projected project cost share would be your total organizational costs for the annual year. And so, Amy, we can go to the next slide. And so, you know, the steps going forward, we have the strategic plan. Out of this, I'm going to put pen to paper and get more specifics into what's our work plan for the year and what's that mean budgetarily. Again, we have this sort of base budget we're working off of. I think maybe we'll recommend some adjustments off that, but probably modest. And again, those adjustments would relate to, do we really know all the things we're going to work on? If not, how do we address that uncertainty? And then how do we build financial administrative reserves over time? And then the process will be that every year we'll try to get you this information early. In April, we'll come to you for approval. And then the last chance for approval would be June, and then we'll be off and running for the new fiscal year. And then also it should be clear that, you know, the all-in cost for each of the members would be this base general cost and your project cost share estimate. So that's how we'll move forward. And I hope this is clear to everyone. I'd welcome any questions before we wrap up, Chair.
Thanks. So any comments from board members before we go to the public? Maybe I'll make a comment or two. So this is all very reflective of what we did in our strategic plan. And if I may say, the budget ad hoc subcommittee developed this next year's projected budget that we shared to align the strategic plan also. And I think at that point, we all kind of gave a non-committed thumbs up that this was the right number. And the way I see it, Alex, is we have the strategic plan. We have a number of things on our plate to do right away. And so I'm very supportive of this budget. And maybe, you know, I think in the coming months, maybe there's even an amended budget. If the board thinks that we need to be doing more, I'd be happy to look at business cases like what Nick suggested to support something like that. So, so the question here for the board is to provide feedback just on Alex's current thinking. And we are expecting to bring the budget at that 1.1 million or so that we had developed in the budget subcommittee to the board in April, unless you want to do something different of a change in budget or change in timeline. So let me go over to Jeff.
I hate that I'm always first. Does anyone else want to go first? All
A
right.
second.
Um, so I think this is definitely the right place to start. I also have minor concerns, not big ones, that we may be a little lean for when we think about attending to the contracts we've already signed in addition to any new activities. Every time we've been doing major procurement in the last 2 years in particular, the staff effort per contract has roughly doubled in the last 2 years relative to, say, a decade ago. The market, the amount of effort to handle MIC issues in transmission and classification of RA and supply chain slowdowns and et cetera, has just, everything's gotten harder. And so I think as we think about this, I think it's the right place to start. And I think it's the budget I want to support. But I do have in the back of my head that there may need to be an adjustment at some point, or at least a thinking heading into the second year of Alex's tenure. So I'm aware of that and thinking that there may be one adjustment this year at some point, ahead of us after this. Hopefully not, but I just wanted to voice that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Others? Barbara, you're up next.
So I guess in thinking about what Alex has presented here, I think an important distinction will be what's a project administrative cost versus a general administrative cost. As you showed the slide earlier on, what did you call it? A la carte services. I think that really, that's really going to be a challenging distinction, right? What's a project admin cost versus a general admin? So I just think some attention to that issue is going to be important. And for San Francisco, our approval process was made those distinctions between what, sort of like a membership cost is and what a project cost is. So that'll be important for us to understand as we go forward for our next authorization, which we will have to do before the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Barbara, if I may just ask a clarifying kind of question. The CC Power budget, we expect to bring it in as early as next month, and the fiscal year will be July through June. And the number that we've discussed so far is about $1.1 million. So would you need to go back to your board to get that approved?
We'll have to look at our overall budget and see if we have room for that. Alex and I chatted earlier. We are on a 2-year cycle, and this is coming mid-cycle for us. So,
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
a little challenging.
If I may make a comment, well, we have Jan. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to echo some of the other comments made about making sure we have enough money in the budget. I guess one area that there's zero, or maybe this is, there's like zero for the operations. And I would suggest that not be a zero. Maybe this is just an example and this isn't what you're proposing, but I just want to make sure that we have sufficient funds and that we know ahead of time what those are going to be, as opposed to not having enough and then having to come back to us for additional funds. But it kind of echoes what Jeff said earlier, that we need to make sure that we're not making it so lean that we're going to get caught partway through the year.
While I wait for other people to raise their hands, my comment on this is I'm supportive of having actually a higher budget if necessary, but it really needs to be justified. And it's also the project side versus general admin side. I also want to set up our general manager for success. He's just joined us. So we want to make sure that we have, the discussions with all of us. And I think what we're trying to balance is we really had this sense last year. We don't want to keep coming back to the board and asking for changes. It's like a one and done for the year as much as we can. I think there's a little bit of a timing issue here of Alex being just coming in and we're really ramping up, right? So that's what our strategic plan has, a number of things. So I'd be very supportive of maybe a one amendment, but I hear what people are saying. So that's what we want, comments from everyone, so that when we come back in April, it really is reflective of the board sentiments. Right. Nick, you're unmuted. Do you want to say anything or not? No. Okay, not seeing a hand raised. All right, Alex, do you have what you need for this item?
I do. I look forward to closing the loop with everybody. Thanks for the participation. This was very helpful. And again, I'll digest everything that's said and come back for hopefully a straightforward budget authorization next month.
So at this point, I'd like to go to public comment. Board members, if you have anyone from the public at your locations that would like to comment on this item, would you please raise your virtual hand or physical hand so we can call on that member of the public? Not seeing any, we'll move on to item 7. Discussion of any individual member items. If anyone would like to share, please raise your virtual hand. Jan?
Thank you, Girish. Hello to everyone. I just wanted everyone to know, and maybe most of you probably do know, that I am planning to retire at the end of June. And we will be doing a search for a new CEO. The job description will be coming out sometime this month in March. It'll be open for 30 days. We're following kind of a similar model that 3CE followed when Tom announced his retirement. This has been in the works for me for over a year, but we're just kind of going public with it now. So anyway, if you know of any good candidates, please have them check out the website and send their resume into our recruiting person who will be collecting those resumes.
Congratulations, Jan.
Thank you. I'll get up
Thank
to
you and
your energy
congrats.
center sometime, Jeff, but probably once I'm there on vacation.
Barbara?
Jan, did you say April? You're going to retire as of April?
No, the end of June.
Oh, the end of June. Thank you.
Yeah, but
All of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, is this Jan's last meeting? But no, it's not. So
no, you'll
very
see
good. Very good.
more times.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. And I should be at the Cal CCA conference as well. So you'll see me there.
Good. Time to plan the party. Matthew?
Yeah, I was just going to share that we added a new member to the RCEA Joint Powers Agreement, which is the Yurok tribe, which is the largest tribe in California. We have sort of an unusual structure, I think, compared to most CCAs, since we have CCA members and non-CCA members, since the CCA rules are specific to counties and cities, and so we have like the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District as a member, and so the Yurok tribe and any other tribes, we've invited others if they want to join as well. In our region, won't be CCA voting members, which the way that our rules are set up, it's kind of non-substantive as far as actual financial decisions kind of go to the full board regardless. But I think we're the first CCA to have a tribe as one of our members and on our governing board.
Thank you, Matthew. All right. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So with that, we'll move to adjourn this meeting at 1:51. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.